Good morning. I'm speaking to you today from traditional Treaty 6 territory, and I'd like to acknowledge that, as well as the Métis people who share a very deep connection with this land. Tomorrow is the beginning of the 4th session of the 30th Legislature, and I'm pleased to lay out the Alberta NDP's priorities. Right after the last election, we committed to Albertans that we wouldn't just be oppositional, we would be propositional as well. We have a strong record of that over the past 3.5 years, and this coming session is going to be no different. In fact, we've assembled our own alternative throne speech, which details our agenda for the coming session. The alternative throne speech gives Albertans a good idea of what we'll be working on in the coming months, but also what our priorities will be should we form government in the spring. We are focused on the real issues that are facing Albertans. Those are providing real relief for families struggling with high prices and slow wage growth, repairing our public health care system, and building a resilient jobs economy. I encourage everyone to read the whole speech or watch the quick video my colleagues have delivering it. But first, let me go through some of the highlights. On healthcare, our leader, Rachel Notley, will bring forward legislation to ensure public healthcare is protected and strengthened with established healthcare service standards. You'll also see the first major plank of our healthcare platform, which will focus on investments in community-based family care. An Alberta NDP government will bring real resources to the front line. We will work collaboratively with healthcare professionals, and we will end the chaos in our hospitals, with our ambulances, and in our clinics. All Albertans should be able to get the care they need when they need it, close to home. The cost of living, of course, we've seen that rising over and over. We will hold the UCP accountable to reverse their cruel decisions to cut child and family benefits, the seniors benefit, income support, and AISH. But we need to go further, and the Alberta NDP will bring forward legislation to freeze rates on automobile insurance. We will press for rate caps on electricity and natural gas at levels that actually make a difference for Albertans' bills. We will bring forward a vote to launch an investigation into why corporate grocery stores are making record profits while working Albertans struggle to pay for food. We will also propose the creation of an independent seniors advocate, which we need now more than ever as seniors on fixed income try to make ends meet during the highest inflation in 40 years. And finally, building a resilient jobs economy is a top priority for the Alberta NDP. The current energy revenue windfall must be handled thoughtfully so that we can help families today and also build long-term prosperity that's resilient in the face of changing global energy markets. We're very pleased to have the assistance of former ATB senior consultant Todd Hirsch in developing that plan. You will also soon see a new investment framework proposal, which describes how to incent private sector investment, create jobs, pursue innovation, and grow Alberta companies by providing economic certainty and a competitive regulatory environment. What's more, we'll bring forward legislation to protect Alberta investment certainty in law. You'll also see our next steps in our pursuit of a revitalized downtown in Calgary, specifically steps around a new post-secondary campus. We'll also advance our consultations on a comprehensive plan for the future of Edmonton's downtown. All of this and more can be found in the alternative throne speech and online at albertasfuture.ca. Lastly, we will oppose the so-called Sovereignty Act and any other bad UCP ideas that will destroy jobs and stifle our economy. We will oppose any efforts by the UCP to sow more chaos or bring more private profit into our healthcare system. And we will hold the UCP accountable for all the ways they have caused real harm to Alberta families. But we're also bringing forward a substantive policy agenda. If the UCP do not want to support it this year, we are looking forward to presenting it to Albertans in the spring. Thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, and we'll start with questions in person.
differences? I mean, they talk about cost of living, talk about improving healthcare. What are the biggest differences with what you're proposing here?
Yeah. So we have not heard the UCP throne speech just yet. But in the NDP throne speech, what you see is a real focus on the issues that are critical to Alberta families today. Affordability, the economy, as well as our current healthcare system and the healthcare crisis that we have. When we hear the government's throne speech, I will be listening for support for public health care. I would love to see a redirect, a pivot away from their Sovereignty Act, which we are already hearing from chambers of commerce, from energy companies, is putting a chill on investment at a time that we cannot afford it here in the province. But I'm also not going to be holding my breath. And so as the official opposition, we are bringing forward the ideas that we know Albertans are looking for, and we're going to carry those into the legislature as part of the debate.
You mentioned, I'm just going through what you said, on cost of living income supports, namely AISH. I think the government is holding a media availability on some of those details. They have announced plans to re-index it. Are you guys sort of finding common ground on that particular issue now?
So there was common ground when AISH was originally indexed when we were government, and all parties in the legislature voted in support of that. And then shortly after the election, the UCP broke their promise. To keep that indexing, they removed it. Today, families are further and further behind because that indexing was turned off for 3 years. I believe it's almost $3,000 short. Someone on AISH is now today because the indexing was removed by the UCP. So having that indexing put back on is a positive step and something we have been calling for 3 years. But their lack of action has real financial consequences on the people who rely on that income because it is their only way to survive. And so we will continue to demand action from the UCP government, and we will continue to demand that they fix the mistakes that they made and that they introduced that caused this harm to Alberta families.
One more pass for questions in person.
Hey, Christina, Travis McEwen with CBC Edmonton. For you right now, the session starting, what do you see as the main priority that the Alberta NDP will be critical on and continue to push on?
I think there has to be two right now. Our top priorities include healthcare. We just heard about new trailers being set up outside of the Alberta's Children's Hospital in Calgary. Families, parents are so concerned about what's happening in our healthcare system. And at the same time that that's happening, we're hearing the health minister cannot be bothered to meet with healthcare workers to talk about the solutions that are needed. So support for our public healthcare system, reversing the cuts to our public healthcare system that the UCP government have put on is going to be an urgent priority. On top of that, affordability, the cost of living going up, all of the added costs that the UCP have put onto families when they lifted the cap on insurance, they lifted the cap on electricity, they lifted caps on tuition over and over and over. They've added costs onto families. These are two of the top issues that I hear about from constituents day in and day out, and we're going to bring into the legislature.
And we'll go to questions on the phone. Just a reminder to press *9 if you're joining us on the phone, raise hand function if you're joining us via Zoom. You can say your name and your outlet off the top. We'll go to our first caller.
CP, hope you can hear me.
Yes, hello.
Hi, so my first question's a two-parter based on your alternative throne speech. One quote, "We'll push for action from the feds to bring certainty to regulatory approvals and to unlock real investments." Now, can you expand on what that looks like? And can you tell me what this new post-secondary campus looks like in Calgary? Is it a new campus for the U of C, or is it actually an entirely new post-secondary institution?
Thank you very much for both of those questions. Working with the federal government and ensuring that there's clear regulatory certainty for our energy industry has been an ongoing theme for the past 7, 8 years, certainly, possibly longer. Continuing that work is what we're referring to in the throne speech. And for more specific details, I can perhaps have staff follow up with you. Regarding the post-secondary campus, this is part of our strategy to revitalize Calgary's downtown. And when our municipal affairs critic Joe Ceci first released our Alberta's Future strategy to revitalize Calgary's downtown about 6 months ago, one of the items in that strategy was a new post-secondary campus downtown and exploring the possibilities. And so the work on that is going to continue. It's going to involve partnering with existing post-secondaries, perhaps. And for that, Joe Ceci will be making further announcements and explaining those steps during this session in the next 4 weeks. So there will be more to come, but for more details, you can also look back to our revitalization of downtown Calgary strategy that we released about 6 months ago.
Any follow-up, Dean?
Sure. What do you, broadly looking at this session, Christina, what do you see? Starting with, I think we now have more cabinet ministers than we do opposition members. So how are we carving out the critic portfolios here, with some of these niche ones? And how do you think the tone will go now that we have a new premier? Are you getting a sense that it will be a little less bitter?
So really, really great question. I'm not certain what the tone is going to look like. Where there's opportunities for us to agree, we will. But honestly, Dean, there are so many things where we strongly disagree. The possibility of the Sovereignty Act to devastate our economy, put a chill on investment, something that her own cabinet ministers have spoken out against. We will be speaking strongly against that act, and we will be advocating ferociously on the issues that we know are important to Albertans: healthcare, affordability. Will it be materially different? We will see. As far as the number of cabinet ministers, you're right, it's an enormous cabinet. And as the Labour critic, the missing Labour ministry is certainly a concern for me. But I will continue to be the Labour critic as we go in. We will continue to ask the hard questions of this government, demand answers and actions on behalf of Albertans, and I look forward to that debate.
We'll go to our next caller.
Hello, Janet French here from the CBC.
Hello, Janet.
Hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Question number one. I'm scrolling. I'm looking for it. Legislation to protect Alberta investment certainty in law. What do you mean by that? Tell me more about that, please.
Well, I'm afraid I can't scoop my, my colleagues and fellow critics, but certainly investment certainty is something we're hearing about strongly from business and energy stakeholders right now, particularly given the Sovereignty Act, we're being told, is already putting a chill on investment. There have been a number of changes in investment programs, some of those tax credits that were there under the NDP government and removed by the UCP government. The legislation at a high level, I will just say, is aiming to bring more investment certainty, to clearly communicate to business and to our professional sectors that Alberta is an ideal place to invest. We hope that the government will provide support, and more detail will come when that legislation is going to be introduced, and that will come from our critic who is bringing that forward.
I think you just asked me if I have a follow-up, and I do. My other question is about healthcare, and it seems like we're hearing from both parties that there's a lot of promises to reinvigorate the front lines and beef up primary care and get people the doctor and the access they need. But I mean, it doesn't matter who the ruling party is, you're all facing the same bottlenecks of a lack of enthusiastic workers. So can you be more specific about exactly tangibly how would you fix this?
So there's a massive difference between the UCP approach and the NDP approach. For our approach to healthcare, we strongly support public healthcare and support frontline workers. As we speak right now, nurses and other healthcare workers have asked for an audience with the Minister of Health, who has refused to sit down with them. That's unacceptable at a time that we are setting up trailers outside of a children's hospital. Being able to work with frontline healthcare workers to address a challenge like this materially impacts whether workers will want to stay and work here in Alberta. So that's huge. Secondly, this government has cut $300 million from healthcare during a time of intense crisis, again, when we are setting up trailers outside of the Alberta Children's Hospital. Cuts to healthcare, refusals to work with frontline healthcare workers, starting fights with doctors and nurses. All of these things are damaging our current healthcare system, and all of these things are things that an NDP government would put a complete end to. So yes, lots of people talking about healthcare because Albertans are worried about healthcare. It is a priority issue for them, but the UCP are not putting forward solutions. They are just bringing more chaos. We need solutions. We need a stable, responsible government to address what's happening in our healthcare system.
We'll go to our next caller.
Oh, good morning. It's Catherine Gurkowski with Alberta Today. Couple questions. So I'm getting a little confused with this alternatives throne speech and what you'd like to see happen had you been in government, and then what's actually going to happen with you in opposition. So I'm wondering, there's only 2 Mondays that I see in the schedule of this session. So which of the bills that are in this alternative throne speech are you hoping to actually bring forward?
No, thank you so much for the question, Catherine. And the intention of the alternative throne speech is to really walk you through what we will be doing in this session across the next 4 weeks. And you're right about the number of Mondays. However, the introduction of a new private member's bill can happen on any day of the week. It gives us an opportunity to signal that the bill is coming, to be able to talk about what will be inside of it. And so you will see introduced the private member's bills that have been outlined inside of this alternative throne speech.
Follow up, Catherine.
Beginning with, actually, I will just say, on Thursday, Bill 1, introduced by Rachel Notley around protecting public health care. You will see that introduced very shortly.
Perfect. And have you, since there is also in this cabinet shuffle a new House leader, I'm wondering, have you had the chance to meet with the new House leader? I know, like in previous sittings, there's been some procedural shenanigans, and it wasn't always the friendliest of times. Have you had a chance to sit down with the new House leader yet?
Yes, I've sat down a couple of times with the new government House leader, and I hope that we are going to be able to have an effective session in the legislature, debating things we agree and strongly disagree with.
And we'll go to our next caller.
Hi, it's Audrey Never from French CBC. Can you tell us which areas you think there is some bipartisanship that can happen where you could support the government's priorities? We already have an outline of what they want to do. For example, this Inflation Relief Act, is that something you think the NDP can support?
Thank you for the question. So certainly affordability is a major issue for Albertans, and the Inflation Relief Act, although it hasn't been introduced, the Premier signaled a lot of the content during her televised address. We're hearing from many of the 2 million Albertans who were left out of the Inflation Relief Act. I imagine that we will have a number of amendments to make during the debate of that piece of legislation, and how the government responds to those amendments may dictate our support or opposition to that piece of legislation. Certainly, as we go forward to sit in the legislature, we're looking for places where we can all agree. I anticipate that the government will support us in our call for action on grocery prices, and a motion we'll be bringing forward. I think that's an area we can find common ground. And the support for some of the private members' bills that we'll be bringing forward, including investment certainty. This is something that the UCP government should be looking for as well. Perhaps they will support that private members' bill, support for public health care as well, introduced by our leader, Rachel Notley. So I think there is a lot of opportunity for agreement to be found, and where there is disagreement, we will disagree vigorously.
And what do you think what's your level of confidence in being able to, have bipartisanship? The last legislature was, with Premier Kenney, was pretty acrimonious, very little bipartisanship, very few bills you fully supported. So how do you feel about this one?
So we are dealing with system of government where vigorous debate, I think, is an important part of it. Where we can find areas of commonality, we certainly will. I know I was proud to be part of the unanimous and single-day passing of paid vaccination leave for all Albertans. I think that was a particularly highlighting point where we were able to find common ground and do something to support workers in this province during the COVID-19 pandemic. When there are opportunities for us to work with the government to do good things, we certainly will.
Do one more pass for questions. Star 9 if you're joining us on the phone. Raise hand function if you're joining us via Zoom. And seeing none, that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.